Hello everyone and welcome to the Music Professor channel. I'm here with Loki, who's lying waiting for his morning walk. So we won't be long because he's keen to have his morning walk. My name's Matthew King. Welcome to the channel. And please, if you like our content, subscribe and please feel free. In fact, we really encourage you to donate because we are reliant on your generosity to keep our content flowing out into the public domain. And please even consider becoming a patron. And you can see the Patreon details. There are various ways you can give to the channel in the video description below. So today's discussion really picks up on something that's sort of been touched on in previous videos, and I've been asked about it quite a bit, about this comparison between Mozart and Mendelssohn, both of whom were child prodigies. And why is this interesting? I guess because talent is interesting. Talent and the way that it fosters and develops is important. We live in an era of bombastic elderly narcissists.
Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, #1.
And I think it's important that young people are liberated, are free to show the life-affirming talents that they have. There's something heroic about young, talented people, I think. And the two examples I've got today are Mozart and Mendelssohn. So I think both of them demonstrate a principle that I would suggest is important, which is that young people need to be given the tools in order to express their talent. People don't just develop talent for no reason. They're usually trained, often quite in a very disciplined way at the outset, and then they kind of take wing and they don't do what their mentors or their teachers require of them. Mozart's a famous case. He was very, very sort of drilled into being this brilliant musician by his dad, Leopold, and it's obviously an exceptional kid and just soaked up the training, and it was very rigorous training that he received as a small child. We would say it was tiger parenting by modern standards, but it gave us this phenomenal musician who then, and this is the miracle of Mozart, then flowered from being a child genius into being a mature one. That doesn't always happen, by the way, but in Mozart's case it really did. And in order for that flowering to take place, I would suggest that you have to, at a certain point, the young individual has to move beyond the point where they have simply assimilated the knowledge and the technique and the discipline which they've been raised in, and they have to break out of it. They have to go in another direction. They have to, as Mozart did, violate the sort of authoritarian control of the parent. Leopold was an authoritarian parent, and Mozart had to go his own way. And that, I think, partly accounts for the astonishing achievements of his career. It's not just about the child genius, it's also about what happened when he developed and became an even greater composer as an adult. So the comparison is with Mendelssohn, and I've made the case on this channel, and perhaps we'll show the clip, because I think it needs a little bit of elaborating. Mendelssohn was the most brilliant composer ever. I mean, much more brilliant than Mozart as a teenager. He was completely incredible. And he published a whole bunch of masterpieces. I mean, at the age of 16, he was writing the Octet. Unbelievable masterpiece. So this little quote of me saying that has become slightly controversial. And I understand that. And I'm going to make the case in broader terms. Mozart, of course, is the defining child prodigy of pretty much of history. But I would say that Mendelssohn, who was younger, born in 1809, so almost 50 years or so later, Mendelssohn came from a more affluent, extremely cultured family who knew lots of famous people like Goethe, and they had relatives who were married to famous literary figures. And it was very much a household where famous people would pop in for tea, and they lived in a lovely house in Berlin, and they had access to the culture of the period in a way that few people had that privilege. But they didn't waste that privilege. Young Mendelssohn, Felix Mendelssohn and his sister Fanny, both child prodigies by the way. In fact, Zelter, Goethe's friend, the composer Zelter, when he met them as young children, said that Fanny was the more talented of the two. So, and Fanny was an amazing talent and a brilliant musician, but she was not encouraged to become a composer by her father, and that's kind of a tragedy. The works that we do have of hers, particularly some of the piano music and the D minor piano trio, are fabulous pieces. But I'm going to talk about Felix, just because of this Mozart-Mendelssohn comparison that I've made in the past. So the point that I made, and I stick by it, is that although they're both brilliant children, it was Mendelssohn who wrote more masterpieces. So if you count the period between, let's say, the age of 10 and the age of 20, I think there's only one Mozart piece that I can think of that is absolutely a mature masterpiece from that period, and that's his A major symphony, his 29th symphony, which he wrote at the age of 18. So that's not to say that there aren't wonderful pieces from that period, but they're all wonderful pieces in the sense that you say, what an amazing piece for a 12-year-old, or that kind of statement. It's always with the qualification that you're dealing with a child or with an emerging adult. Absolutely brimming with genius, but I wouldn't say any of them are mature masterpieces in that absolutely, significant literature sense of this is a defining work of art until the 29th Symphony, and I think then you get it. So he's 18. Amazing, 18. Mendelssohn, by contrast, had written 12-string symphonies, between 12 and 13, I think he was. But he wrote his first card-carrying masterpiece at the age of 16, and that was the String Octet, which is a piece for 2-string quartets. So two-string quartets make 1-string octet, and what an amazing piece. And it's brimming over with the energy, a unique energy of a young person, but it's also absolutely perfect. It's like a perfect structure, the textures, everything about it just brimming over with marvels. But the octet is not the end of the story. He then went on to write a piece that I'm going to talk about in a minute, the Midsummer Night's Dream Overture, which he wrote when he was 17. Phenomenal achievement and an absolute masterpiece, almost the defining sound of early Romanticism, in my opinion. And then the no less extraordinary first 2-string quartets, which are clearly modelled on Beethoven's late quartets to some degree, particularly the A minor, and in some ways are equivalent, I would say, to Beethoven. That's a very contentious point, but I think the A minor quartet is in some ways as good as Beethoven's late A minor quartet, almost as good. I mean, technically, certainly as good. So the young Mendelssohn, absolutely prodigious composer, churning out masterpiece after masterpiece. So yes, in terms of productivity of mature masterpieces before the age of 20, I would say it's unquestionable that Mendelssohn is the most extraordinary composer of all. But if you can think of anyone else who's equivalent, let me know. So I'm going to suggest that we look at 3 pieces very quickly. I want to look at 2 pieces by Mozart, early pieces, just because they're wonderful, and then we'll look at the very beginning of the Midsummer Night's Dream Overture and just see what we can find out about the measure of talent that we've been talking about. So the first piece, let's just look at the very, very beginning. I played it at the start of the video. The very beginning of Mozart's first symphony. How old was Mozart when he wrote his first symphony? So most people when they're writing their first symphony might be in their 20s or maybe 30s. Beethoven was around 30 when he wrote his first symphony. Mozart was 8 when he wrote it. I don't think has anyone topped that. 8 years old when he wrote his first symphony. And it's charming because he wrote it in London. He was staying in Chelsea. And you can see a picture of it now. The house where Wolfgang and his father Leopold stayed in Chelsea in 1764 when Mozart was 8 years old. And he was visiting London. This was the famous occasion when he was tested by Daines Barrington for his oral skills. And have a look at our previous video because Daines Barrington comes into that video. And it's the visit when Mozart met Johann Christian Bach, the famous son of Johann Sebastian Bach. Johann Christian had come to London and was writing lots and lots of symphonies and defining the new steel gallant and being very successful in London. London was the place he went in those days, as to some extent it is now, if you wanted to become rich and famous. So that's what Johann Christian was doing in London, and to some extent that's what Leopold and Wolfgang were doing. Leopold was hoping to show off the marvels of his son to London society. So Wolfgang was staying in his house and he wrote the First Symphony. And did his father have any intervention into the writing of it? No doubt Leopold would take a look and probably suggest things. There's every hint in the music that Mozart was, as every young composer is, reliant on the techniques of composition that he'd learnt, and he was doing lots of counterpoint exercises, and that's very evident in the beautiful sequence of suspensions, which are essentially like first species counterpoint, just a lovely sequence of beautiful... A suspension, by the way, is when you move from a consonant chord, or a convergence of, in this case, 3 lines. One gets suspended over the top while the other 2 move into a dissonance which needs to be resolved, and so on. So you get this chain of suspensions and resolutions. And that's what Mozart writes. But it's in his hands, it's transformed from sounding anything like an exercise to sounding like this beautiful, melancholic thing. This is the nature, I suppose, of genius in a way, as you can take... I've said it in a previous video. In Mozart, you encounter all the tropes of a style are from the steel gallant, from the late 18th century. It runs all the way through his life. He uses cliche after cliche in a sense, but he transforms these cliches into pure gold. It's like, which is the fairy tale? Is it Rumpelstiltskin who can transform thread into gold? That's what Mozart does, even at the age of 8. For example, he starts off with the standard, it's in E flat major. What you did in the steel gallant was that you began a symphony with some kind of statement of the triad. And by the way, this is still a convention in Beethoven's time. Look at Beethoven writing his groundbreaking Eroica Symphony in 1803, 50 years later, and the cellos are playing an E-flat triad. So it's still common practice with Beethoven, and that's a revolutionary piece. But this is how you begin a symphony. You began a symphony as some kind of statement of the tonality. That was the standard way to do it. In Mozart's case, he outlines an E-flat major triad, arpeggio, in the entire orchestra. But what's cool about it, and slightly cheeky, is that it's outlined in a sort of palindrome. And it's just got a kind of chirpy, slightly mischievous quality, because he has a rhythm that's slightly reminiscent to me of birdsong. Mozart, I think, was influenced by birdsong. He had a little pet canary later in his life. And there is this lovely sort of bird-like chirruping about it. So you get this. Do you see how it's a palindrome? You climb up to the B flat, so it's E flat, G, then you repeat the B flat lots of times, and then you bounce back down the other 2 notes. I mean, okay, it's in a sense ordinary, but it isn't ordinary, is it? There's something about the rhythm of it that's surprising, but also wonderfully symmetrical, like a little mirror, and also sort of reminiscent of birdsong. And all. Do you see how he's packing in, and he always did this throughout his life, packing in lots of different suggestions, symbols, if you like, that are pointing you to a number of rather intriguing things. There's a wonderful combination of conventionality and surprise, which for my money is what genius is. You combine something that's known and something that's unknown, or you give the audience something that's familiar, but also something that isn't. So that's the first thing that's surprising. The second thing that's absolutely surprising is that you follow it with what his contemporaries would have called an adagio, I think. Not an adagio in any sense of tempo changing. The tempo remains the same. It's simply that he's writing in semi-breves. So you get these long notes and this melancholy atmosphere, this beautiful sequence of wonderfully scored suspensions. And the whole atmosphere changes. So you have this perky opening and then this melancholy answer. Isn't that amazing? So this is what I mean by a young composer at the age of 8 doing all sorts of wonderful things. I don't think this is a mature masterpiece. It doesn't go on to become a work that you'd say is equivalent to, say, the Eroica Symphony. It isn't. It's a brilliant piece for an 8-year-old. And that's the nature of Mozart's talent at that age. He was wonderfully gifted, but he was a kid. With Mendelssohn, it's different. It's almost like he was, by the time he was 12 or 13, he seemed to have that kind of maturity. Goethe, who knew Mendelssohn and had met Mozart, said that compared with the young Mendelssohn, Mozart seemed I think he said something like, it's like the prattling of a child. I mean, I think perhaps Goethe overemphasized it, but Mendelssohn had a maturity by the time he was writing the pieces, the great masterpieces of his teenage years, that I would say Mozart didn't have. Right, but we're talking about Mozart. Now, what do you think, Loki? Because I don't think you're a genius, but you are keen to go for a walk. There's no question about that, is there? So we will do it in a minute. But let me just talk about one more Mozart piece and one more Mendelssohn piece, okay? Right, we're going to go on to the next example. This is my first example of Mozart's mature masterpiece. And it's his 29th Symphony, which he wrote when he was 18 years old, in A major. It's very familiar, I'm sure, to everybody, but interesting to compare certain details with the little piece that we heard a minute ago, his 8-year-old First Symphony, because you've still got the perkiness, and you've still got the counterpoint exercise thing. So this is wonderful, this opening. You get this... So again, we've got this... a climbing sequence this time, but it has, to some extent, it has that feel of something that might have grown out of an exercise, but at the same time, it's got this wonderful life-giving quality, which I think comes out of this kind of rhythm. Mozart loved these octave leap type ideas because they give such energy, don't they? The octave leap and then the offbeat da 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 da. It's full of vigour and charisma, and it's got this again slightly bird-like sort of twittering quality with the repeated notes, just like the First Symphony did. Then you get the repetition of that, and it climbs up. Underneath that sort of vigorous idea is something absolutely different. Do you remember we talked about contrast in the First Symphony? This is more subtle. The contrast is going on within the texture. Underneath that vigorous top line in the first violins, you've got the lower strings doing... Do you remember I said that thing about an adagio? It's like a slower tempo until it gets to the cadence point. So you've got this mixture of the slow and the fast together. It's quite hard to do this. And then we go off into the big tutti happens with the oboes coming in. This time, when the oboes come in with the horns, you get this lovely long pedal note. Can you see it in the score, the long pedal note going over the top? And then the masterstroke here is to have the violins playing the rhythm kind of out of sync. So it's like a canon with the violins, and then the lower... Isn't that marvellous? So you got that kind of ricocheting effect, a kind of canon of the principal idea going on through the strings, treble to bass, as if you're in a duet of first violins against a duet of lower strings. And then over the top of it, very special, I think, is this, and it gives this lovely resonance to the whole thing, in a sense, a kind of calm, resonant object, the held A running through it. Have a listen. So we've covered the openings of 2 Mozart symphonies, one he wrote when he was 8, one that he wrote 10 years later when he was 18, and I would say it's his first mature masterpiece. Let's turn our attention very quickly to Mendelssohn. His first mature masterpiece, I would say, is the string octet, which he wrote when he was 16. And the following year, he wrote this, the Midsummer Night's Dream Overture. And we're just going to look at the opening chords and just hint at some of the miracles of that piece. I think it's a miraculous piece, astonishing piece. But he could have written it when he was 80, in the sense that it has all the technical assurance of a great artist, but we know that he didn't write it. We can sense in the music that he isn't 80, that he is a young person. This is the wonderful thing about early Mendelssohn, is the music brims over with a kind of youthful exuberance. Absolutely fantastic. Freshness, the dawning of romanticism in the hands of a 17-year-old lad. It's really heroic to me. It's an amazing thing. And look at the scoring of this opening. You've got, and this is a miracle. And Beethoven wasn't orchestrating like this. This is a young composer so conscious of sonority, of orchestral sound, that it's become as important a part of the compositional process as everything else. Mendelssohn, I think, is the first composer, although Berlioz is doing it at around the same time. But actually, even Berlioz isn't quite there yet. Midsummer Night's Dream in the early 1820s is just ahead of Berlioz. So here he is, and he's really rethinking what an orchestra can do. Look at these opening chords. The very way to begin, first of all, to begin an orchestral piece like this in this absolutely dreamlike way is a new thing to do. And look at how he does it. Orchestral pieces normally start with a thump, even modern ones. But here he is with just a pair of flutes. What an extraordinarily bold thing to do, just a pair of flutes playing a third, and a third without the fifth is always going to have a degree of ambiguity. You know, is it C sharp minor? He plays around with these tonal ambiguities later. Is it E major? We don't quite know what it is. We just hear this pair of flutes, and it's such a pure sound. And then the second chord, he has the flutes on the top, playing a fourth, and underneath a pair of clarinets. So the clarinets they're playing an F sharp and a D, the clarinets, that's what they've written down, but those are notated a minor third above the sounding pitch, so F sharp is in fact D sharp, and D is in fact B. So do you see they're playing, the sounding pitch is a D sharp and B. So let's just do this again. Flutes, and then the B major chord with the flutes at the top and the clarinets. Notice there are no oboes because he wants that lovely mix of flutes and clarinets, both of them capable of lovely soft sound and a kind of, they're not double reeds, so that they've got this warmer sound as well. It's clear, it's bright, it's soft. It's it's not doesn't have that melancholy that a double reed sound has. So it's just this lovely freshness of spring. Remember, this is Shakespeare. You know, he's inspired by Shakespeare to write this music. This is the moment when you wake up. This is waking up, and everything is magical. Doors are opening. There's this wonderful fantasy world that you're waking up to with these beautiful chords. Right, the third chord, even more extraordinary, is this. So that's A minor. So that you're not expecting that. You've come from tonic to dominant. As it turns out, this is subdominant minor. But isn't that beautiful? We're very used to this kind of thing nowadays because of film music and stuff, but it's a wonderful third chord. And it's not just the harmony, it's the scoring. So look, pair of flutes up on that lovely high fifth, clarinets there playing the third underneath. Then you've got the bassoons on the A and a horn, written C but sounding E just a sixth below. So isn't that a gorgeous sound? And then, almost most magical of all, the final chord. Notice how the registers are expanding with each. So we're going right up to that high third in the flutes, open fifth in the oboes, sounding beautiful and sort of a fifth, you know, the fifths have a brightness. Oboes come in on that. Clarinets also on a fifth, an octave below that. So we've got a pair of fifths there just to create that brightness of sound. There's a second third perfectly placed. So we've got a third here and that's E and G sharp. We've got a B and a G sharp in the bassoons with a pair of fifths between them, and then a pair of horns at the bottom. It's a miracle. And then the strings. After that huge and wonderful E major chord, we've got the strings coming in a very tight position on the E minor, just a root position E minor, which is absolutely not what you expect after the wonderful glowing, widely spaced E major chord and the wind instruments. And then suddenly the shift to strings, totally different timbre, and this sort of tight root position E minor chord. Do you notice how the violas just hang over into the next bar as the upper strings start their fluttering in thirds? Fantastic, sort of fairy world. No one had ever written for strings like this before, this sort of fizzing, fluttering. Incredible. The whole piece is incredible. Listen to it. I will just point out a couple of other things. The handling of sonata form. Sometime we must do a whole discussion about sonata form, but the handling of sonata form in this is magnificent and original. And the second subject is marvellous. It contains the best imitation of a donkey braying that I think exists in music. It's a magnificent donkey. So that's Midsummer Night's Dream Overture of Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn has suffered historically because Wagner and other people made all sorts of idiotic pronouncements about, well, in Wagner's case, it was motivated by envy. He was very jealous of Mendelssohn because he was so successful as a young composer, and there were personal reasons. Mendelssohn was not only a great composer, he was also a famous conductor in the early 19th century, and he was the principal conductor of the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra, very famous orchestra then and now. And Wagner had sent him the score of his first symphony, asking if he would consider performing it. And Mendelssohn didn't respond. Probably too busy. It happens all the time. Young composers shouldn't get discouraged when people don't respond to them because people are busy. I mean, sometimes people just can't be bothered, but often it's simply that there's busyness. And anyway, Wagner took it personally and wrote terrible things about Mendelssohn, unforgivable things. And other people too have tarnished his reputation. And it's anti-Semitism in most cases. Mendelssohn's genius is certainly perhaps most evident in his early music. No question about that. I think his conducting responsibilities got in the way a little bit of his compositional ones. This isn't unusual. Composers who get involved in conducting. Mahler's a great exception to this. He managed to juggle the two, but I think it's really hard to do it effectively. I did a video a few weeks ago about Pierre Boulez, who became famous as a conductor, and I think his composition suffered. I think that's true to some degree in Mendelssohn, but he still composed masterpieces right up to the last year of his life. His final F minor string quartet, by the way, written in the final year of his life, gives an absolute lie to the notion that Mendelssohn's genius tapered off. It really didn't. He was still a great composer. And remember, he died in his 30s, so he didn't really have very long to compose. And as I say, the conducting got in the way. Okay, that's enough about Mendelssohn and Mozart. Let me know what you think, and feel free to disagree with me. I'm sure many of you will, but that's all good fun. Okay, and I'll see you soon. Please like and subscribe. Consider donating to the channel. Thank you for watching.